Artists and athletes and scientists and inventors, they go into these concentrated states where they do the thing that makes them famous, the thing that moves the world, and they all talk about it in very similar ways.
Continuous partial attention. You are context switching so often in your life that you never reach a state where you are actually fully inhabiting any one context.
There is no prize for returning your emails. No company wins because all their Slack messages are read. They win because someone walked into the staff meeting and said, I was thinking yesterday, ...
It's another way to sort of hack your brain.
If you want to be great, there are people around you who will outwork you. You need to figure out how to get the most out of every minute of your brain.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is an educational episode.
Hey, I'm Chris Saad.
And I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
And on today's show, we're going to discuss the topic of flow. COVID plunged many of us for the first time into the world of remote work. Zoom calls, pajamas, blurred backgrounds, blurred boundaries. But this new way of working has exacerbated a big problem when it comes to productivity and doing our best work, which is flow state. On this week's episode, we're going to talk about what is flow, why it matters, how to find it, and how it can supercharge your startup. Steven Puri spent 20 years leading remote teams and helping people with flow as EVP of DreamWorks and VP at 20th Century Fox, and then a 3-time tech co-founder. Along the way, he's learned what actually makes flow happen from some of the best, most creative minds in the world. He's been involved with some of the biggest movies you've ever heard of and some of the most amazing creators from Hollywood. He's going to tell us about that and how they achieve flow state as well. We're also going to talk a little bit about Star Trek throughout the episode because he was involved in the Star Trek 2009 reboot, and I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, so you'll hear us talk about that as well. So all of that and much, much more on this week's show right after the break.
Today's episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by Cyber Matters. Cyber Matters helps startups and scale-ups get security compliance right the first time. Building a startup is hard enough, believe me. Founders do not have months to waste on paperwork, or even worse, dealing with the fallout of bad advice. The team at Cyber Matters run managed GRC programs, internal audits, and risk reviews, all designed to fit how tech companies actually work. From SOC 2 to ISO 27001, they cut through the noise, set up platforms like Drata, and keep you audit ready without slowing you down. Cyber Matters, practical security done properly. Visit cybermatters.io to get started.
All right, Steven, let's start with something super, super simple. What the heck is flow state?
And why should you care, right?
And why should you care?
I will tell you how I discovered it, and then I'll tell you what it was. I was on a flight from Austin, where I am, to San Francisco, and the next day I was going to meet with my team. And there was a feature I wanted to sort of hack together in Figma. I'm not a great Figma, but I get enough to illustrate something, right? Get on the flight. Alaska runs that nonstop route. Captain starts, hey, Wi-Fi's out, so sorry. We take off. I start working. We start descending 15 minutes later. I'm like, an engine fell off. Something bad happened. We're landing in DFW, and when we're on the ground, they will tell us what the bad thing that happened, right? I looked at the clock. 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by. We were at SFO. And my designs were done. And I liked them. And I was like, what just happened? Because I was prepared for rush through hotel lobby, grab a sandwich, go to the hotel room, finish designs for morning meeting, right? And in reality, I would call a buddy. I was like, I have a free night in SF. You want to have dinner? So what was that? It's interesting. A Hungarian-American psychologist, this guy Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he had a thesis. He said, high performers in very different disciplines, artists and athletes and scientists and inventors, they go into these concentrated states where they do the thing that makes them famous, the thing that moves the world, and they all talk about it in very similar ways. He's like, what's up with that? So like Prometheus, he wanted to go up to Mount Olympus and say, give me some fire, I want to bring it down to the rest of us, right? When he was done with his research, he wrote a book called Flow, from whence we get the term flow state. And he said this great thing. He said, I chose this word because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found, which is we're all on the river paddling ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, you go further, you go faster, it carries you. It magnifies your effort. And that is what these high performers have figured out how to do, and do it consistently. Now, since that time, a lot of people have written amazing research on different aspects of this. What are the conditions that help you get in? How you can accelerate it? But when Mihai said stands, which he said, here are the characteristics of a flow state. You lose track of time. Check. I had no idea how much time had gone by. Distractions fall away because you're very focused on work you find to be meaningful. At the end of doing that, you've done great work and you are energized. You feel a sense of joy from being in control rather than depleted from the work. So Mihai was very open. He's like, some people I spoke to and some people in pop culture have different words for it. Michael Jordan has that great quote about when I'm in the zone, it's just me and the ball, you know? And there's that Picasso quote about, you know, I was up all night. I lost track of time. I don't think I ate or I went to the bathroom, but hey, you know, Guernica, what do you think? Do you like it? And it is amazing when you understand how you can employ that to get in control of your life, of your work, and do great work that returns you energy rather than depletes you. So that's what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, that's really profound, Stephen. I think hopefully many of the people listening, certainly I have experienced that, and it always feels all too rare, but very, very magical. As you were talking, it reminded me of something else I've heard amazing creators, artists, musicians say, which is that, I don't write these songs or I don't make these things. They're sort of channeled through me. It kind of comes from the universe or comes from God or
yes, the muses speak.
The muse, right? And good Star Trek episode, by the way. And so
you Trekker.
You know, I used to experience this when I was programming, when I was writing code when I was very young. You know, minutes would turn to hours and hours would turn into not I mean, maybe not whole days, but this is many hours.
Late bedtimes.
Yes, and it's been a while since I've experienced it because my work is so interrupted, you know, in little 1 hour chunks. But recently I was vibe coding for the, you know, and playing with what I can create there, and I got lost in that again. And my wife was sort of like, where have you been? What are you doing? And I'm like, you haven't seen me like this. We've been together, you know, 7, 8, 9 years. You haven't really seen me in this sort of getting sucked into the flow state. And so it is this magical, wonderful thing. The question is it more than that? You know, does it matter to you and your business in a way that is measurable, material, impactful? And if so, what is that? What is that measurement? What is that impact that we might think about?
There's a lot of conversation right now about 996, and you guys have probably covered an episode, maybe I haven't heard. There are many ways to get to the finish line, you know? And one of the things that I've appreciated, I think, you know, from how you introduced me, people are familiar that I've worked on very high profile movies with the kind of writers that crank out 2 or 3 studio movies a year, right? I've worked with engineers, designers that are operating at the top of their game. And there's a way in which you do that where you operate at the top of your game, you are burned out, and then you end up doing too many mushrooms or LSD trips and you're kind of like out there, right? And there's another way where it's sustainable. And I think that's a really important distinction because one of the joys of a flow state is you do really great work in a compact way that leaves you feeling like there's gas in the tank, as opposed to, I know I'm doing a great job because I'm sleeping under my desk 3 nights a week.
Chris, you mentioned programming, and I'm a software engineer. I'm a programmer by background. And so when I think about something like flow, you know, there's this concept in computer science of context switching, right? This idea that when...
It's more than just CS, yeah.
Exactly, right. It's more than just CS, but like this concept is sort of quite formalized there, right? Because if the computer is doing one thing, and it has all of the most important information in its fastest memory and its cache and all of that, and it's executing one instruction after another, it is really efficient. As soon as it pauses that and says, oh, okay, now I need to do something completely different, you get massive inefficiencies, right? You get a huge switching cost. And not only do you have that initial cost of going from one context to another, in the new context, to reach peak efficiency takes quite a lot of time until all the right things are in memory and everything is just set for prime execution. And I've also heard this term, Steven, continuous partial attention, which I think is also speaks to the current era of scrolling on your phones and so on. This idea that you're context switching so often in your life that you never reach a state where you are actually fully inhabiting any one context. And without that, I think you cannot possibly work efficiently or be in a flow state.
It is absolutely true. Let us hang a lantern on what you just said, because I speak so frequently about exactly that, which is there is a concept, especially with people medically diagnosed with ADHD, someone on this recording you're talking to, and you find with a lot of my founder friends too, that you have this belief that you can jump between different things and sort of like you're a multi-threaded processor and you're running all these things concurrently. And the research actually shows what you said, which I'm going to be explicit about, which is no, we monotask, and you can context switch, where it's almost like you were saying, you sort of have to take whatever's on the processor, store everything to RAM, reload the context of the other thing you're working on, run that for a while, store that to RAM, reload from RAM, and you go back and forth. And it's monotasking with a lot of wasted energy and wasted time, right? Cycles, if you will. So completely agree with you. And Cal Newport has written some fantastic stuff on this.
I love Cal Newport.
You also, something I want to pull forward from what you said was, in between these Zooms, I have an hour here, so I can't really get into a deep vibe coding flow, if you will, right? And this is a really important concept. So suppose, for example, there are some ambitious founders listening to this pod. Let's just imagine thousands of them out there.
Hi, everybody.
And they're thinking, how do I deploy my most precious resource in the most effective way possible? And that resource is your brain. If you are a founder, and yes, you're in the middle, I think, Yaniv, you were just fundraising recently, weren't you?
I'm still fundraising. Folks, if you're angel investors and keen to come in on my round, DM me.
Right, exactly. There's a term sheet posted on my Twitter.
Applies to you too, Steven.
Right. So if you are a founder, a startup founder in particular, yes, life is chaotic because you're fundraising, you're hiring, you're working on product, you're overseeing distribution, marketing, partnership deals, sponsorships, the whole thing, right? It's chaotic, very hard to get into flow. However, someone there, if you're the principal engineer of that 2-person startup, or if you were just the founder of a 15-person startup, someone there needs to be doing the deep work. There is no prize for returning your emails. No company wins because all their Slack messages are read. They win because someone walked into the staff meeting and said, I was thinking yesterday, ... And everyone goes, fuck, we should do that. That comes from deep work. And that's not in between Zooms, I have 17 minutes. Use that for returning the emails. But if you are dedicated, if you're the person doing that, you need to time block. You need to say, here's sacred time. Figure out your chronotype. And by the way, I'm going to work in a story about chronotype here, and I'm going to return to the main thread, which is chronotype. For those who don't know, many of you obviously do, but for those who don't, it is the concept there are times of day you're more adept at certain kinds of things. Now, the first time I encountered this was actually in film. There's a screenwriter, this guy, Ron Bass, who's an attorney turned screenwriter, infamous, would not talk to his family in the morning as a rule. And he said to them, listen, when I start talking to you, I can't hear my characters' voices in my head. And he wrote characters that Julia Roberts played, Tom Cruise, Dustin. He wrote Rain Man. He wrote Best Friend's Wedding. He wrote all these. He's $1 million screen club, And his family was like, fine, we can make our own pancakes. Like, we could go write $1 million scripts, Dad, right? Because he was that aware. At 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. is when he wrote those words that would get an A-list actor to say, this is what I'm doing. My spring will be this character, right? And in the afternoon, he knew he was very good at collaborative work. So if you want to have a studio notes meeting, if you wanted to have writers over and brainstorm on a scene, that was afternoon work. So the exact same thing applies. If you become aware of your chronotype or your team's chronotypes, you can say, hey, to do the work that actually moves us forward, we need to have dedicated time to do that. I can't set meetings with you every hour on the hour and expect in between you're going to do deep work, right? The research on flow, you need 15 to 23 minutes to fall in. You don't just snap your fingers and say, I'm in a flow state. And if you get interrupted by that Slack message, hey, Chris, that TPS report, can you send me a copy? It takes you another 15 to 23 to get back in. So it's a culture that you create as a leader, either to say, hey, let's all block out this time and agree not to set meetings with each other from like 9 to 10 in the morning, or whatever the time may be for you guys, not to Slack each other. Or if you're an IC, to say, hey, you know what? If you want the best out of me, I need to have like 3 to 5 p.m. and I will do the things, contribute,
So just before we go too deep on how you find it and how you protect it, I want to just finish off this question of, does it matter, and to who does it matter, and why does it matter? It seems clear that flow is really important and powerful for your personal productivity. It's important for doing your best work. So not just a lot of work, but good, high quality work.
Correct.
It's important to avoid burnout, so that you're doing this sort of effortlessly. But those three things are primarily about you personally. We can start to generalize this out to, hey, others in your team, if they are experiencing this, then they will be doing their best work, high quality work, high volumes of work. In the world of, Silicon Valley style tech companies, of course, many of these companies are most populated by engineers.
Correct.
That might change soon with large language models.
Who's been vibe coding, Chris?
Yes, exactly.
Who's leaked their private keys on the internet, Chris?
Exactly. I noticed all your job postings came down, Chris.
But of course, the reality is, the truism is that engineers suffer from and benefit from flow the most, because engineering is a particularly deep set of work. It's a craft that requires a lot of context in your mind, sort of understanding the architecture of what you're working on.
100% with you. Very well put. Yes.
And, I think a lot of executives, managers, even product managers don't quite understand the degree to which flow is extremely important to their engineers. And they distract them in all sorts of ways, for all sorts of things. Maybe, as probably the only engineer on the call, on the show, maybe talk a little bit about the kind of crazy stuff you've seen in companies where you've been trying to achieve flow state, or the ways you've protected flow state for engineers specifically, because it makes up so much of a tech startup's life.
Yeah, I'll say some stuff here, and then also Steven, keen to hear your thoughts. But it's funny, Chris, because you mentioned your wife looking at you after you did that vibe coding. She's like, "Oh, what's happening with you?" And I'm the engineer at my startup, Violet, and the first time I'd gone through a long session of coding, and I got on a call with her, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what's wrong?" And she said, "There's something strange about you." And I said, "Oh, I think it's just because I've been doing a lot of coding." And now when I get on a call with her after I've been in a flow state for a while, she's like, "I recognize that face. You've just been coding." And it's really interesting how you kind of get into that state and how important it is. But yes, this is exactly the point. Steven, when you were talking before, I had that cliche, but nonetheless a very true one, about working smarter, not harder, right? You're talking about 996 and all that.
Yes.
And working hard is about assuming that time is fungible, right? That as long as you put lots of hours in, you will be more productive. But you're talking about chronotypes. We're talking about not interrupting flow, getting into context. This is all about making better use of the time and treating each bit of time in a way that maximizes the opportunity there.
Let me pick up on two things that you said. When you were talking about someone recognizing in you the energy that you had after flow, right? Being in flow, I was coding, I was there, I was in the zone, right? What Chris said about, there are PMs, there are product people, there are other people in the organization that may not understand what it's like to be an engineer and have been in a flow state and gone, I did great work and I feel great. So it's really incumbent upon us to educate them. Like, my wife is the head of digital for a large US bank, and she is intimately aware of how my rhythms work because, like you said, she's experienced that. So I think it's a very good point you made, Chris, and it really comes down to education, to say, at some point, if a PM goes, "Oh, Chris is going to do the most amazing work if I give him this 2-hour block and let him go deep," or 3-hour block. So people will come around. Another thing to bring up about working hard, working smart, time. I would offer that it is time, yes. Like, even the richest man in the world can't buy more time. We've been down the cliche, but it's also brain energy. You only have so many units each day of brain energy. It's why, with decision fatigue, you see Jobs and Zuckerberg and all these guys wear the same outfit, eat the same breakfast, that thing, just to limit how much they expend of their brain energy. And that sensitivity, when you start to understand, hey, the work that I did, the 4th hour grinding it out, the marginal value of that was lower than the 2nd hour, and the 8th hour of grinding it out was less than the 4th hour, then you start to seek out the things that rejuvenate you during the day. And I'll give you a very concrete example. We talked to a lot of psychologists about this in designing the website that I built, which is a flow state website. And we included a Pomodoro timer front and center to say, hey, it actually helps you every 25 minutes to take 5 minutes. And we offer you like a stretching exercise, a breathing exercise. We give you points if you get a glass of water, go for a walk. You can customize the timer if you want, as you recognize your own rhythm. But that sense of, hey, it's been 2 hours, I should go do something for 15 or 20 minutes. A lot of my friends who are great software engineers, they had to learn that in their 30s because in their 20s, they were doing the thing of like grinding it out for 10, 12 hours in a row and realizing they would rewrite a lot of their code the next day that was written in the last 3 hours. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So, first of all,
You're welcome.
you said that it's important to educate other people. If you are somebody who needs to work in flow, it's important to educate other people. Yes, but it's also important to stand up for yourself. This is something that I learned early on, and that a lot of engineers, especially I think maybe if the personality type, are not very good at. Right? Like I've managed engineers for most of my career, right? And what often happens is I have my one-on-ones with them, and they say, I didn't get much done this week because my product manager put all these meetings in my calendar and it screwed me around. And I'm like, why did you go to the meetings? And they were like, well, they were on my calendar. And I said, well, you could have asked for them to be rescheduled. You could have asked if you needed to be there. You could have asked if it was the best use of your time. But instead you just went. And so I think there's this sense of treating your own time as a valuable, precious resource. And more to the point, treating your own attention as a valuable, precious resource. That is so, so important. The other thing I wanted to say is you were talking about taking those breaks. It's really interesting because I posted about this on LinkedIn a few days ago in the context of vibe coding, because we've mentioned vibe coding a couple of times, and it's quite interesting because when you give I use Claude Code. When you give Claude Code a task to do, it will take somewhere between 1 and 6 minutes to do that task, which is an awkward amount of time. And so you can't just sit there staring at it. But what I found really important is not to break my context. So if I go scroll social media, I've actually initiated a context switch, right? I'm now thinking about something else.
Yes.
So the trick is to do something that is not a new context so you can preserve context. And I said that I've been cleaning up my house. My house is a lot cleaner since I started vibe coding. Because I'll be like, I've got 5 minutes. I'm going to change the sheets on the bed. I'm going to wash a few dishes. And then I can go back and my context is still intact. So I think that's really important when you talk about taking breaks. It's what are you doing during that break is actually really important.
If you would like your hamstrings to be more limber, do one of our stretching exercises at the desk.
But do not scroll social media. Do not check your email.
That's exactly correct.
Right? I think it's very easy to think that you are taking a break when you're checking email. But what you're doing is you're just exploding your context, and it will take you a long time to recover from that so-called break.
One of the superpowers that I believe I have is actually the ability to grind it out despite context switching, despite sort of a lack of flow state. So one of my superpowers is to be able to jump on these calls, every hour, and move into a kind of instant high performance while context switching, and to do that for a sustained period of time over a long period of time. But it's exhausting. It is absolutely, I am smashed by the end of it. And so it is sort of, I'm brute forcing into or past the need for flow state. It's very, very tiring. And sometimes I wonder like, hey, why am I so tired? I haven't worked that long, but I've been working very hard to overcome, I guess, my biology. And so this conversation is sort of reminding me that maybe I need to find a different way of working, or I need to go find the current, and maybe I'll be a lot less exhausted at the end of every day.
Scaling fast? Congratulations. Do not let compliance trip you up. Cyber Matters makes GRC simple. Policies, audits, and risk management built for real companies, not tick box exercises. Go to cybermatters.io to learn more. That's cybermatters.io.
Hey, before we get back into the show, a quick reminder. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications, and spread the word about the podcast. It helps us grow the show, which in turn helps us help more founders like you. Thanks so much. Okay, with that, back to the show. Let's continue to enumerate all the ways that people can help find and protect their flow state. We've talked about educating others.
Yes.
Just so that they're more sensitive to it.
Which goes up and down. It's educating your team or educating your boss, your engineering manager. Yeah.
Yes, and educating yourself on what it is and why it
Yeah.
matters.
Agreed.
Yaniv, one of the things I think is the most important role and function of engineering leaders, from the CTO down to engineering managers, is to create that space for their engineers through ways of working and patterns of behavior and meeting free zones, but also to educate the engineers that they're allowed to say no and to empower them. We've talked about creating space for yourself, blocks on the calendar, and so on. I would add, I guess, in the bullet would be to listen to yourself, or how are you feeling at the end of the day? Are you burned out? When are you feeling most productive, and what gets you there and what gets you out of that? Steven, do you have any other sort of tips, tricks, observations for how people can find or protect their flow state?
How long do you have, Chris?
Exactly.
Okay.
25 minutes.
Okay, let's start with some fun ones, and then we'll get down into some deeper ones, okay? So on the fun side, here is a mental thing that I saw deployed in film that I now recognize some of my friends in tech do too, which is it's about the association your mind has with place, with physical space. I first saw this when I'd met Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, who were putting together Independence Day. And they had asked me to do the visual effects for this next movie. So I was running, a lot of digital computer generated effects stuff. They apparently had been writing their last couple movies at this villa in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And I asked Dean about this once. I was like, why is this, so important? He said, there's this room where the light comes in the morning. It's a beautiful white marble villa. It comes in over the pool, and in that room, we don't think about our agents. We don't think about casting. We don't think about studio notes or budgets. We just write the movie we want to see. So when they were going to write, Roland told his assistant, Joey, go rent the villa, right? She came back that day and said, it's rented. I mean, it was like an Airbnb, pre-Airbnb. She's like, someone has it this month. And Roland called John Deemer, his entertainment attorney. He's a fantastic attorney. He said, John, buy the villa. By Monday, Roland owned a $5 million villa in Puerto Vallarta. And they went down there. I have no idea where the current renters went, but they were not there on Monday. And 6 weeks later, the guys came back with the script that became the third highest grossing movie in film history. That got them into place.
Amazing.
This is where they went to write. They had written Stargate there and a bunch of other stuff, right?
I was going to say, when is Stargate 2 coming out? Tell us, Steven.
Oh my God, they're not together anymore.
That's terrible.
So, and they say success can break you up more than failure. Mm-hmm. After Independence Day, there was a lot of friction. It was a hard time.
We'll know we've made it, Chris. We'll know we've made it when we break up.
I thought we'd already broken up. We were just trying to keep the children happy.
Well, that must be why the podcast is so successful.
Chris was vibe coding his AI avatar. He's not actually here.
Yeah, that's right.
What I was going to say, that was later when I was an executive vice president at DreamWorks for Kurtzman Orci. And, they wrote Star Trek 11, Transformers 1 and 2, Eagle Eye, tons of stuff, right? Great guys. And they had a writing place that brought them to that mental, space. And we were on the Amblin, compound across, part of the Universal lot in Hollywood. Across Lancashire, there's a Universal Hilton. I'm just going to say it is not a glamorous property. It's where you go with your 3 kids the night before you go on the rides and you get the hell out, right? They would have their assistant rent a room there for 2 or 3 weeks at a time when they had to deliver, Transformers 2. And I thought about this because they're pulling down $2 million plus a script. Like they could go anywhere in the world to go write. But I realized for them, they had met back in high school and college era. And I think that room evoked dorm room. And it brought them back to we're these scrappy young writers who have to prove that we're going to be somebody. And that Kurtzman on the edge of the bed with his laptop and Bob at the little desk with his laptop, that was their way of telling their minds, we need to do great work. So I offer this because it is a free way to get your mind to drop in.
Yeah.
You can't just work anywhere because you have a laptop. You can't just work anywhere. You need to sort of say, this is where I do this kind of work. And your mind begins to help you.
Originally, when we were going to record this podcast, it was going to be about remote work and potentially working from home. So I'm just thinking in the context of what you just said, the importance of place to productivity and, the fact that COVID initially pushed everybody to working from home and some of the challenges to do with that probably being about place. So let's say you do work from home. How do you leverage that piece of advice to get into that flow state when you're working from your dining room table?
Yeah. I made a horrible mistake when I started working from home. And I would in the morning be in the kitchen. There's beautiful light in the kitchen. I had a laptop. So I'd work there for a while. Come up to my office in the middle of the day. End of the day, I'd probably end up on the sofa, working down in the living room. And when I called my own attention to this, to saying like, there's a kind of chaotic nature to this, where I'm continually looking at, could I do the dishes or clean up the laundry or do something like that? I started working here. This is my office. And it absolutely has helped me, because when I enter here, I stop thinking about the other things I could be doing. And I go, oh, I'm in this space. This is where I'm going to write a blog post about what we're doing with the platform. This is where I'm going to code a bit, build a new feature. And it is a discipline you apply that's actually not that hard to apply, to say, oh, when I'm going to do this work, I'll be here. And then the rest of the house is a fun place for a family, as opposed to the whole house is kind of a working environment and you bring your laptop to bed. Horrible practice. So I hope that answers your question.
So I have two observations for you, one about this topic and one that has nothing to do with this topic. It's interesting to me you call it Star Trek 11. You've called it Star Trek 11 multiple times. Us fans call it Star Trek 2009.
Oh my God, who cares?
Very interesting.
Yes.
You mentioned place. This is another big mistake that I'm obviously making, because I've always thought that being able to work from home was one of the luxuries of my work. And because I'm on, Zoom calls all day, I've always felt like a co-working space or another place doesn't work, because I essentially just go lock myself in one of those phone booths or something, and otherwise I'll be disturbing everybody.
Right.
And so, I readily just have always worked from home. There's all the distractions of home, but I've always thought of it as there's all the conveniences of home, right? My kid is here. I'm present for my wife and so on. But I think it is another aspect that I'm overlooking that leaves me exhausted at the end of the day, and also probably leaves me less productive for my own personal projects. Because when I'm not tethered to the desk for a call, I'm out of here. I'm off doing something else, which I think of as a luxury. I get to enjoy my home and my life, but is also a productivity suck if I want to get my own personal things done.
This is very true. And part of what I hope people glean from this episode is there are some free things you can do. You do not need to buy anyone's app, including mine, to do a lot of this for yourself. Understand your chronotype, time block for yourself, time box, take healthy breaks, establish a place where your mind knows you do this kind of work. These are all free techniques, and I've seen them applied in two very different fields. I'm lucky to have been successful in two areas where it's like you see great performers, you go, there's a lot of commonality. So much like Mihai said, wow, these high performers and these wildly different things talk about this state similarly. There's something to it. And it's not just engineers though. I'm telling you, like the three biggest cohorts that I have in Sukha, developers, engineers, designers, and authors, because they all need to actually buckle down. And if they do it well, they're done in half the time, and it's good work. But it's just, you have to want to do that.
Steven, we do have a lot of engineers listening to this podcast, but really we're a podcast for founders. And I think one of the questions probably in the back of people's minds, if they're a founder, and we kind of touched on it before, is you are juggling a lot of balls when you're a founder. You're not just able to spend 8 hours a day in flow state. You have got investors, you have got potentially employees, you have got all sorts of different things that you need to be doing just to keep the business running. And so folks who are founders might be listening to this and saying, well, this just doesn't apply to me. How is it possible when I have all of these emails to answer and all of these Slacks to attend to and all of these investors to talk to? What does it mean to me to be in a flow state? Is it just hopeless?
It may be. And here's the thing is, if your startup is a one-person rowboat and you are the one rowing, then yes, it's very important that when you are rowing, you are doing it well. When you graduate to being captain and there's a crew, there's a staff, there's someone else rowing, and you should set the conditions precedent where they are going to do that well, even if you are spending your time with the board, with angels, with hiring, with other activities that are not conducive to flow.
Yeah. I mean, one thought I had, I'd love to run it past you. And again, I think we've touched on it, but like you said, if you're an early stage founder, you're doing it yourself. And so you need to be in flow. But even if you're later on, one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm going to come back to this concept of context switching, because what you get, again, in computers, when you are context switching excessively, is called thrash, right? Which is this idea that you're constantly hopping from context to context to context, never getting into a full context, and you don't actually get anything done at all, right?
Yeah.
Because all of your effort is being spent switching contexts. And I noticed that, when I'm at my worst, when I feel a bit overwhelmed, what I do is I look at my emails. I'm like, damn, that's a lot of emails. I click into one email. I'm like, oh, I click into another email. I go over to Slack. I check Slack. Then I'm on LinkedIn. And then I'm like, I go over to our CRM and I'm like, which investors should I be like contacting? And then I realize an hour has passed and I haven't actually done anything other than switch between tabs. And that's an awful feeling. Right. So I think even, it might not be full flow, right? But even within the context of being a founder, it is still important to create large enough blocks of time that are focused on a single task in order to make progress on it.
Okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of data, which is in our Flow State app, the website, right? It's a web app. We used to show you your whole task list because there's this concept of the Zeigarnik effect, which is if you're holding things in memory, I have to remember to do these 7 things. That actually eats brain energy, right? It's better to get it out. So we allow you to capture all that, to brain dump, if you will, right? One of the problems we had is people would move around and work, like you said, on like, well, let me quickly, I can fix this bug while I'm also working on this feature. And then, I need to do my TPS report and that sort of thing, right? So we did this. It's going to sound stupid, and it worked. As soon as you hit play and the flow music starts and the Pomodoro timer starts and all that, we hide your whole task list except the top 3 things, whatever your top 3 priorities are. Can I tell you, since we did that, our members are 77% more probable to finish all 3 of those than before. Nothing else changed. Same tasks, same members, but it was simply we limited what they could see to work on.
So, Steven, this actually really resonates with something that we speak about a lot on the podcast, which is prioritization, and something that founders need to be much more aggressive at than they are, right? Because you have so many things to do, right? Part of the thrash happens because you're like, oh, I've got 30 things that need to be done. Let me try to do all 30 of them. You spend all of your time thrashing, and instead of getting 30 things done, you get 0 things done, right? So instead of saying, well, out of these 30, which are the top 3, to your point, and let me make sure I get those 3 things done, you will have ended the day more productive because you have prioritized aggressively and you have focused your time on that stuff. But yeah, I think so much of it is about self-discipline, isn't it? About actually having that executive function at the start of the day or whenever it is to say, these are the things I'm going to be doing. And these are other important things. And they are important because everything's important. But I'm not going to do those things today.
What you said, I think, was so well put. I don't feel a need to elaborate on that. So let me expand in a different area, which is with that concept of if you know your top 3 priorities, you're ahead of the game. And if you think you have more than 3, you're fooling yourself because you're going to context switch. The other part of that is to time box, because it is magical when you say, hey, squashing this bug should take me 30 minutes. And you put that in there and you see that little timer. It is weird the way you'll finish in 30. If you just start working on it, it will sprawl.
So just as a matter of sort of getting to the bottom of these top 3 things, if you have more than 3 critical areas of work, you are not precise enough about your near-term and long-term goals.
Yeah,
you're not
very well
doing
put.
something embarrassingly narrow and specific.
Yeah.
And you're doing a lot of hedging and a lot of pancaking your goals. And it seems to me that a technique I use for prioritizing roadmaps is also applicable to prioritizing your life as a founder and your priorities in your business, which is, I often ask, what is the number one reason more people are not more successful with the product more often right now, right? So number one reason, more people are not more successful more often. So you can sort of map that to your startup or to your life, which is what is the number one reason the company is not growing or succeeding more right now? The number one. Again, if you
address that,
address that and only that for that
Chris,
hour,
100% agree with you.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, if it feels like there's 17 of them or even more than one, you are not prioritizing well enough. You are trying to serve too many masters, too many use cases, too many opportunities. You are hedging, and you are not choosing something uncomfortably, embarrassingly narrow to focus on.
Totally agreed.
Okay, so we're going through all the ways that you can get into flow state. We've talked about educating yourself and others. We've talked about creating space, listening to your body and understanding where you get maximum productivity and feel least sort of drained. We've talked about place. Are there any other techniques, tactics that can help you get into flow state and keep you there?
Absolutely. When you guys work, do you listen to anything?
Yeah, I'm normally listening to music.
Chris?
I'm listening to the soft, dulcet sounds of myself talking on the phone all day. So unfortunately, I'm only driving myself crazy. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about sound. Let's talk about the oral environment, because there's been a ton of research on this. It's one of the key components to helping you drop into flow. And most of the research points to there is a sweet spot for most people, which is about 60 to 90 beats per minute in certain key signatures, music that is ambient, non-vocal, so you're not singing along with Blackpink or whatever your jam is. And that is true for most. Now, we all have the friend who's like, no, I have to listen to show tunes or Tchaikovsky or 90s gangster rap or mumble, whatever it is, right? So we've got the outliers that prove the rule. What is interesting is when we set up Sukha, my community, of course, followed the research. And I happen to have a lot of friends who are film composers with time on their hands. Hey guys, here's what the research shows. Can you write like 1,000 hours of music sort of like this, right? And we grouped it into, like upbeat, down-tempo playlist, lo-fi playlist, stuff like that. So you can kind of choose your jam.
I swear to God, my flow state music that I listen to sometimes in the shower or whatever is, without a word of a lie, is Star Trek 2009 soundtrack.
Oh, enough with the Star Trek.
Chris, if we'd known each other then, I would have invited you to set. I'm sorry I didn't know you that.
It is an incredible soundtrack, really, genuinely. I like a lot of stuff. Like I like classic, Berman era Star Trek, but that soundtrack is absolutely amazing.
Okay, so I know that you were a Trekker, and I will let me indulge you for one moment about something you may find interesting, which is we had a lot of resistance between Alex, Bob, JJ in doing the Star Trek thing because there were so many Trekkers, and the deep ones want to be called Trekkers, not Trekkies, right?
I hear that, yeah.
There were so many Trekkers that were proud of the fact that Star Trek 10 had made $44 million domestically because they felt that proved it was a movie for them, by them. It was not a broad audience sellout movie. It was like if you didn't get the red shirt joke and you didn't get this, you just didn't understand it, right? So how do you take that passionate audience but then justify $150, $200 million production budget? Because you can't do that with a $44 million box office domestically, right? So there's a lot of fear around that. This is something that JJ said that really turned a lot of our minds. He said, I want to do this because it is one of these sci-fi works that stands out that has an optimistic view of the future. It is not the aliens are here eating us. It's not the thing where the computers take over and Skynet gets us. It is, we may find a way to survive with our human values. And if you notice, that infuses the cinematography. There are a lot of lens flares in that movie. There are a lot of computer-generated cameras that don't have lens flare, because CG cameras don't have lens flares. You have to write the code to create a lens flare.
Right.
Because he wanted it to feel like the world, the universe was bright. It infused the soundtrack. It infused the casting. It was a very important realization that he made. And I'm glad that you feel that when you listen to the soundtrack, because it is different than listening to The Terminator or 2001 or a lot of these others where you go,
No, it's very uplifting and very hopeful and very and just brilliantly constructed, and Michael Giacchino is an amazing guy.
Amazing. And shall we come back to our sheep, as they say in French?
We should, yes.
Okay. Let's talk more about music, though. There's a little deeper to go here, which is, yes, so binaural beats, you guys have probably played with them, right? Very popular in the Valley the past 10 years. So here's something that I did not see coming, which is there's a friend who is a sound engineer for LucasArts up in Marin and does the games, right? He came back from Nepal and said, hey, listen, my kid's high school graduation present, he wanted to go to Nepal. I went. We were in Kathmandu, and one day it poured. The most delicious, downpour, this lush sound. I had my recording equipment. I recorded 2 hours of it. Do you want it? And I was like, sure, let's try it. We quietly just put it up as one of the many playlists in the list and called it Himalayan Dream Rain. No explanation, just threw it in there. It's our third most popular playlist. And when I queried members, I was like, hey, I noticed you've been, it's in your little frequently listened to. Tell me, what is it about that? And it was interesting how many people said a version of this sentence. It reminds me when I was young and I was at my house, my grandmother's house, my aunt's house, or something else. I grew up in Georgia, and this was how I remember studying when I was a kid. And that sound of the lush rain brings me there. And that opened us up to say, oh, there's some stuff the research didn't turn up, which is this like naturescape. So if there are people out there who are like, man, I don't need to listen to lo-fi beats. God bless, my roommate does it, let him do it. But maybe you want to listen to a stream in Japan or the surf in Cyprus. And I had one woman who said, before the pandemic, I was single. After the pandemic, I have a kid. I used to go to coffee shops to work, and that sound of the baristas with the whatever in the coffee cups, that evokes in me this sense of, oh, I'm here working and I can't go there anymore. We put up a playlist. Someone recorded, I don't know who it was, they put it on the internet, a playlist of a coffee shop in Vienna, Austria. We just threw it up there. You got to find your own jam.
So what this says to me is that, a lot of this can be triggered or fast-tracked or accelerated through sort of Pavlovian responses, right?
Completely.
Sounds, even potentially smells, sights, times of day. And and this is, it's another way to sort of hack your brain,
it's the version of biohacking, exactly. Yeah.
Let me go somewhere slightly controversial, Stephen. And we've talked about work smarter, not harder. We've alluded to 996, which for those who don't know is the idea that you should be working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, so a 72-hour week. Do you think, in order to be a truly great founder, that you need to work long hours? So in other words, can you work smarter, not harder? Or do you need to work smarter and harder? Is it a question of you need to do 996 and you need to make good use of that time? What are your thoughts on that?
I would love to say that there is an easy path to greatness. I do not see one. I've not seen one in my past. If you want to be great, there are people around you who will outwork you, but you need to figure out how to get the most out of every minute of your brain.
Yeah, I would summarize it as you need to out-execute the competition. And out-execute looks different for each person. So some people have luck, some people have family connections, some people have money, some people have talent, some people have hard work, and some people need to combine those things in unique combinations. I'll add some people have insight, judgment, taste, right? So you have to combine those things in a unique combination at a unique problem, problem founder fit at the right time, at the right place, with the right people.
Yes.
It is literally like lightning striking. And anyone who tells you they have a recipe is lying to you. But what you can do is you can maximize the number of ingredients by being aware of the ingredients and being intentional about the recipe. And that all that does is increase probability, so it can't guarantee you success.
It is probability. Like you said, you can't discount the amount of luck. Like if you think about the macroeconomic tailwinds that propelled like Uber and Airbnb forward, both those ideas had been tried a couple of years earlier, but they just happened to be the ones trying them when we had a recession. And then suddenly the idea of driving someone in the backseat of your car or having someone sleep on your sofa was more plausible than 5 years earlier.
Yeah, but also Travis was a force of nature who could literally not be stopped. He was
the world is
impossible.
populated with a lot of people like that, but those economic tailwinds
absolutely
helped a lot.
An idea whose time has come.
Exactly.
All right, Steven. Well, that has been absolutely fantastic. You've alluded to your app. How can people find you on the internet, follow your work personally, and then find your app?
I would say two things. Number one, if there's anything that I've said that leads to a question, who is Cal? What did Nir write? Who is the Hungarian guy? You can send me an email. My email is very public. It's Steven with a V at thesukha, TheSukha.co for company. And I will give you a link or something to help educate you and get you on your journey. Doesn't have to be about anything I'm working on. And if someone wants to try getting into a flow state, that is what we built. It's at thesukha, TheSukha.co, and it's free for 7 days. No credit card, no funny business. Just do something great.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you for joining us on the show. It's been a great conversation. I need to go change all my lifestyle habits so I'm not so exhausted and can get into flow state.
Now, Chris, we learnt today you have the superpower of context switching and giving things your full attention nearly instantaneously, and you bring that talent to bear to help a whole bunch of different startups. So if folks would like to learn from you and take advantage of that laser focus, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can learn more about my work over at chrissard.com/advisory or subscribe to my newsletter at chrissard.com/newsletter. How about you, Yaniv?
I'm on LinkedIn trying to make it a less boring place. I love getting connection requests from TSP listeners. So if you are on LinkedIn, send me a connection request. Let me know you come from the show and I'll happily accept it.
All right, that's the pod. We'll catch you in the next one.
See ya. This episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Cyber Matters. Startup security doesn't need to be painful. Cyber Matters runs complex compliance programs that keep you audit ready and focused on growth. Check out cybermatters.io to learn more. That's cybermatters.io.